There is a moment, captured on a grainy security camera outside a riverside shelter, that would end up saving a man's life, and no one watched it until it was almost too late. By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why a man who could make people disappear with a single phone call chose instead to stand in a shelter hallway and say 4 words no one who knew him ever expected to hear: "I was wrong about you." But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This starts 3 weeks earlier, with a warning. Dominic Marchetti did not raise his voice. He never had to. In his world, volume was for men who hadn't yet learned that stillness was more frightening. He sat in his office on the 14th floor, city lights bleeding through the window behind him, and listened to Ray Bianchi read from a folder that told him almost nothing at all. Ethan Cole, Ray said. 34. Divorced, no, widowed. 1 kid, 7 years old. Works maintenance at the Riverside shelter. No record. No debts worth mentioning. Pays his rent 2 days late, every month, like clockwork. Dominic didn't look up from the photograph in front of him, his daughter, Sophia, laughing at something just off camera, taken from across a parking lot by a man paid to notice things Dominic could not be there to notice himself. "That's it?" Dominic asked. "That's it. Nobody is just that clean." Ray closed the folder. "Maybe he is." Dominic didn't answer. He was already looking at the second photograph, Sophia and a lean man in a faded navy jacket, standing close together outside the shelter doors, her hand briefly touching his arm the way people touch someone they trust. He'd built an empire on the belief that nothing stayed clean if you looked hard enough. So he decided to look harder. Here's what Dominic didn't know yet, the thing that would upend everything he thought he understood about the janitor his daughter had grown close to. 3 weeks before that folder ever landed on his desk, Sophia Marchetti had been walking home from a late shift at the shelter, cutting through the train station underpass the way she always did when she was tired and wanted the shortest route. The overhead lights flickered the way they always did. She barely noticed. She didn't hear him until he was already behind her. A hand closed around her bag strap. A voice, low and rushed, told her not to scream. And for 3 seconds that would stretch out strangely in her memory afterward, slower than they had any right to be, Sophia Marchetti, daughter of a man other men feared, was completely and utterly powerless. Then someone else was there. Ethan didn't think about it. That was the truth he would carry afterward, the part he could never quite explain to anyone who asked. There hadn't been a decision. He'd been 20 feet behind her, heading the same way home, and his body had simply moved before his mind caught up to what it was doing. He got between Sophia and the man with the hand on her bag. He took a blow to the ribs that would leave a bruise he'd tell his son was just clumsiness. And then the mugger was gone, running, and Sophia was standing there shaking, and a stranger in a faded work jacket was asking if she was okay. She never told anyone. Neither did he. That was the whole of it. No police report. No witnesses beyond a camera mounted on the shelter's exterior wall, positioned to watch a side entrance and catching, almost by accident, a sliver of the underpass entrance across the street, a detail so small that not even Ethan remembered it was there. Sophia kept the secret because she didn't want her father to turn one bad night into a war. Ethan kept it because, in his mind, it wasn't a story. It was just a Tuesday where he happened to be walking the right direction at the right time. Neither of them could have guessed how loud that silence would become. The first time Dominic Marchetti walked into the Riverside shelter, he didn't come to threaten anyone. He told himself that, at least. He came to see for himself. He stood near the doorway in his dark overcoat, out of place among the folding tables and the bulletin board covered in handwritten thank you notes, and he watched his daughter work a room like she'd been doing it her whole life, refilling a coffee urn, laughing with an elderly man in a wheelchair, checking in with a mother and 2 kids at a corner table. She looked lighter here than she did anywhere else Dominic had ever seen her. That should have told him something. Instead, it unsettled him. Then he saw the man. Ethan Cole was pushing a mop cart down the far hallway, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a shelter ID badge clipped crooked to his jacket. He said something to Sophia as she passed him. She laughed, really laughed, head tipped back, and touched his arm the same way she had in the photograph. Dominic had spent 30 years learning to read a room in half a second. He read this one wrong. He waited until Sophia stepped into the back office, then he crossed the hallway, and Ray fell into step half a pace behind him, the way he always did. Ethan looked up from the cart and went very still. Not frightened, exactly, cautious, the way a man goes still when he senses weather changing. "You're the one who's been spending time with my daughter," Dominic said. "Not a question. I work here," Ethan said carefully. "Sophia and I are co-workers." Co-workers. Dominic let the word sit in the air like something he was tasting and didn't care for. "You know who I am?" A pause. "I've heard the name." "Then you know I don't waste time." Dominic stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint scar along his jaw, close enough that the mop cart between them suddenly felt like the thinnest possible barrier in the world. "Stay away from my daughter." The hallway had gone quiet. Somewhere behind them, a coffee machine hissed and clicked off. Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about his son, Leo, waiting for him at his sister's apartment 2 blocks away, and about the rent that was always 2 days late, and about how easily a man like this could take away the one steady thing in his life without raising his voice above a murmur. He thought about a dozen ways to explain himself and discarded every one of them, because he understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that nothing he said in this moment would matter. "Not yet." "Understood," Ethan said quietly. Dominic held his gaze a moment longer, searching for something, fear, maybe, or a flicker of guilt he could point to and say, "There, that's the tell." He found neither. Just a tired man standing very still, holding a mop handle like it was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. That should have told Dominic something too. It didn't. Not yet. He turned and walked out, Ray trailing behind him, and the shelter door swung shut on its hinge with a sound too small for a moment that big. If you'd asked Dominic, in that hallway, what he thought he was protecting his daughter from, he might not have had a clean answer. That was the uncomfortable truth underneath 30 years of certainty. Somewhere along the way, protecting Sophia had become less about any specific danger and more about never again feeling the particular helplessness he'd felt the year her mother got sick. He hadn't been there enough then. He told himself he would never make that mistake again, with anyone, about anything. It was easier to control a hallway than to sit with the memory of a hospital room he'd walked out of one too many times for one too many phone calls. He didn't examine any of that. Men like Dominic rarely did, out loud. What he did instead was call Ray into his office that same night and tell him to dig deeper. "Everyone's clean until you find the thing they're hiding," Dominic said. "Find it." Ray found nothing, again. And this time, the nothing bothered Dominic even more than something would have. Sophia noticed the change in Ethan before she understood the reason for it. He grew quieter at work, more careful with his words, the easy rapport between them replaced by something more guarded. He still smiled when she came by the supply closet to steal a coffee, still asked about her week, but there was a wall now, low and polite, that hadn't been there before. It took her 3 days to get it out of him. "Your father came to see me," Ethan finally admitted, wiping down a table that didn't need wiping down, unable to look at her while he said it. "Told me to stay away from you." Sophia felt something cold drop through her chest. "He what?" "I get it," Ethan said quickly, like he'd rehearsed the reasonableness of it. "He's protecting you. I'd probably do the same if I were him. You don't have to make excuses for him." "I'm not making excuses." He finally looked at her. "I just can't afford trouble, Sophia. I've got Leo. I need this job. I need things to stay simple." She wanted to tell him right then, the whole truth, the underpass, the mugger, the bruise on his rib she'd noticed once and never asked about because he'd changed the subject so smoothly she hadn't thought to push. She wanted to march into her father's office that same night and lay it all out like evidence in a trial. But some instinct held her back, some old, tired understanding of how her father processed things. Dominic didn't believe things because he was told them. He believed things because he saw them for himself. So instead she said only, "Give me a little time." She didn't know yet how little time they had. 3 days later, Dominic's investigation into the clean janitor took an unexpected turn, not because Ray found something damning, but because he found something worse. From Dominic's perspective, he found nothing worth finding at all. No debts, no priors, no ties to anyone Dominic recognized. A man who worked 2 jobs some weeks to keep his son in a decent school district. A man whose only real secret, as far as anyone could tell, was that he didn't have one. To most people, that would have been reassuring. To Dominic, it read like a man who was very, very good at hiding. "There's something we're not seeing," Dominic said, more to himself than to Ray. "Nobody's just good. Not with nothing to gain." It's a strange thing, the way power can warp a man's ability to recognize simplicity. Dominic had spent so long assuming hidden motives that he'd lost the ability to imagine a version of the world where a man helped a stranger and asked for nothing back. That blind spot, more than any real evidence, was what pushed him toward the mistake he almost made. He told Ray to increase pressure. Talk to the shelter director. Find a reason to have Ethan Cole quietly removed from his position, not fired outright, nothing so obvious it could be traced back, but made inconvenient enough that he'd leave on his own. A schedule that no longer worked. A supervisor suddenly unhappy with performance that had been fine for 2 years. It was the kind of soft, deniable cruelty Dominic's world specialized in. And it would have worked, quietly and completely, if Sophia hadn't found out about it first. She confronted her father in his office, the same room with the framed photograph on the desk that he thought no one paid attention to, a photograph of her mother, worn soft at the corners from years of being picked up and set back down. "You're trying to get him fired," Sophia said. Not a question either, this time. 2 people who didn't ask questions when they already knew the answer. It was, in its own strange way, the first proof of how alike they were. Dominic didn't deny it. "I'm protecting you." "From what, Dad?" Her voice cracked, not from weakness but from 3 days of holding something in. "From a man who works a mop for $11 an hour and spends every free minute with his kid? What exactly do you think he's done?" "I don't know yet. That's the problem." "No." Sophia stepped closer to the desk, closer to the photograph she suddenly understood better than she ever had before. "The problem is you can't imagine that someone might just be good, and it's making you tear apart the first real friend I've had in years." Silence settled into the room, thick enough to feel. Then Sophia said the thing she'd been holding onto for 3 days, the thing that would crack the whole case Dominic had built against a man who'd never done anything but show up. 3 weeks ago, someone tried to mug me in the train underpass by the shelter. She watched her father's face change, watched 30 years of careful control slip for just a moment. Ethan was behind me. He stepped in. He got hit protecting me, and he never said a word about it to anyone, not to get credit, not to get anything. He just did it, and then he went back to mopping floors like it never happened. Dominic sat very still. "You've spent 2 weeks trying to destroy the one person who actually kept me safe," Sophia said quietly. "While you were busy protecting me from a threat that didn't exist." Here's where it gets complicated, because knowing something and believing it, for a man like Dominic Marchetti, were 2 very different things. He didn't argue with Sophia. He didn't apologize either, not yet. He simply asked, in a voice quieter than she'd heard from him in years, "Is there footage?" There was. The shelter's exterior camera, the one meant to watch the side entrance, had caught a corner of the underpass across the street, grainy, distant, time-stamped 3 weeks earlier at 9:47 p.m. Sophia hadn't watched it herself. She hadn't needed to. She'd lived it. Dominic watched it alone, late that night, in the dark of his office with only the desk lamp burning. He watched a small, blurred figure grab for a young woman's bag. Watched another figure, lean, unremarkable, a man he'd stood over in a hallway and threatened without a second thought, step directly into the path of danger meant for someone else. Watched him take the blow. Watched him stay upright, watched the mugger flee, watched him check on Sophia with the careful, unhurried patience Dominic now recognized from that hallway conversation, the same stillness he'd mistaken for something to fear. He watched it twice more. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a man who realizes he has spent weeks constructing an elaborate case against someone who had already, quietly, saved the thing he valued most in the world. Dominic sat with that silence for a long time. He thought about the hospital room he used to leave too early. He thought about how much easier it had always been for him to control a room than to trust the people in it. He thought about a single dad working double shifts who had never once asked for anything in return for putting his own body between danger and another man's daughter. Then he closed the laptop, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Dominic Marchetti did not know what to do next. He went to the shelter the next afternoon. Alone, no Ray, no overcoat this time, just a man walking into a building full of people he had no power over and nothing to threaten. Ethan was in the same hallway, same mop cart, when he looked up and saw Dominic standing there. Something in his shoulders tightened automatically, an old instinct kicking in before his mind caught up. "I'm not here for that," Dominic said quickly, hands open at his sides, a gesture so unfamiliar to him it felt almost foreign in his own body. "I saw the footage." Ethan's face didn't change much. That was, in its own way, the most telling thing about him. Even now, even confronted with the truth finally surfacing, he didn't reach for it, didn't lean into the moment to make himself look better. "It wasn't anything," he said. "Wrong place, right time. It wasn't nothing." Dominic's voice had lost the low, measured control it usually carried. "You got hurt protecting my daughter, and you never told anyone. Not her. Not me. Not for credit, not for anything." He paused, and the next words came out rougher than he intended, 30 years of careful composure cracking around the edges. "I threatened you. I tried to have you pushed out of a job you needed, because I couldn't imagine that a person could just do the right thing and want nothing for it." Ethan set down the mop handle. Somewhere down the hallway, Sophia had stopped, watching from the office doorway, not moving, barely breathing. "I have a son," Ethan said finally, quietly. "I don't have room in my life for enemies I didn't ask for. I wasn't trying to prove anything to you. I just didn't want anyone to get hurt on a night I happened to be walking the same way home." Dominic nodded slowly. "I know that now." There was a long pause, the kind of pause that, in Dominic's world, usually preceded something final. Ethan seemed to brace for it out of habit. Instead, Dominic extended his hand. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I don't say that often. I'm saying it now." Ethan looked at the hand for a moment, then shook it. It was, on the surface, a small gesture, two men shaking hands in a shelter hallway that smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. But for Dominic, it was the closest thing to surrender he'd offered anyone in decades. And for Ethan, it was the first time in years that being seen clearly hadn't cost him something. Word travels quietly in places like the Riverside shelter, and by the following week, most of the staff had pieced together some version of what happened, a boss, a warning, a truth that reshaped everything. None of them got the full story. It didn't matter. What mattered was what came after. Dominic didn't offer Ethan money, not directly. He understood by then that a man with Ethan's pride wouldn't take a handout dressed up as an apology. Instead, he offered something quieter, a maintenance supervisor position at one of the properties his company managed legitimately, stable hours, benefits, a wage that would let a single dad stop working double shifts just to keep his son in a decent school district. "No strings," he said. "No favors owed." Ethan turned it down the first time. Pride, mostly, the same instinct that had kept him silent about the underpass in the first place. But 2 weeks later, watching Leo do homework at their kitchen table under a bulb that flickered the same way the underpass lights had, he called Dominic back and asked if the offer still stood. It did. Sophia watched the two of them, weeks later, standing outside the shelter on a cold afternoon, her father, arms crossed, listening with something like real attention while Ethan explained a repair he was making to the shelter's old boiler system, something he still came back to fix on weekends even though he no longer needed the job. Dominic asked a question. Ethan answered. Somewhere in the exchange, Dominic actually laughed, a short, surprised sound Sophia hadn't heard from him in years. Two of the most protective men she had ever known, finally standing on the same side of something. She thought about the underpass sometimes, still, not with fear anymore, but with a strange kind of gratitude for how close everything had come to breaking in the opposite direction. A father who nearly destroyed the one person who'd kept his daughter safe, simply because he couldn't imagine kindness without a hidden cost. A single dad who'd been ready to disappear quietly rather than fight for the truth. It hadn't taken a confession, or a confrontation, or even a threat, in the end, to bridge that gap. It had taken a few seconds of grainy footage, and a daughter brave enough to say what both men were too proud to say first. Dominic never talked about that night in his office, watching the footage alone. He didn't need to. Everyone who mattered had already seen the difference in how he carried himself afterward, a little less certain, a little more willing to wait before assuming the worst. Some debts, it turns out, aren't paid back with money or power. Some are paid back simply by finally seeing someone clearly, and having the humility to say so out loud. Have you ever been wrongly judged by someone who was only trying to protect the people they love?